Good evening, everyone. I'm going to do a talk now called The Heart of Buddhist Teaching. The Heart of Buddhist Teaching. So Buddhism, as we know it, started with Siddhartha Gautama, who came to be known as the Buddha. And the word Buddha just means enlightened. The voice of the silence, which was translated by H.P. Blavatsky, says, "Look inward, thou art Buddha." It means that we are all Buddha or enlightened. We just have to wake up and realize it. Plato stated that all learning is merely recollection, just remembering what we already know. So Siddhartha was born approximately 2,500 years ago in Nepal. Now, it's traditionally said that he was born in India, but I think a lot of research shows that he was actually born in Nepal, just over the border. But it's a bit controversial. And he was born into a life of luxury as a prince. His father was King Suddhodana and his mother Queen Maya. He grew up in India, which at the time was dominated by the Hindu religion. He had many Hindu beliefs, including the idea of samsara, the wheel of life and death, which was a basic Hindu teaching, also reincarnation and karma. But Hinduism had a strict caste system as well, and Buddhism teaches the equality of all beings, of all living things. According to legends, Queen Maya had a dream in which she learned she would give birth to a child who would be a holy man. He was given the name Siddhartha because it means perfect fulfillment. And after Siddhartha was born, a prophecy foretold that he would be a great ruler or a holy man. Shortly after this, his mother died. The king wanted him to be a great ruler rather than a holy man. So he shielded his son from seeing any pain or suffering. Siddhartha lived a life of luxury in a palace. The king made sure his son had everything in this palace, so he wouldn't want to leave and wouldn't question anything. But Siddhartha grew up to become a caring and kind person. When he was 16 years old, he married his cousin, Yasodhara, and had a son, Rahula. Siddhartha wondered about the world around him and wanted to see what was outside the palace. With his chariot driver, Channa, he left the palace secretly on a trip to the city and saw what had become known as the four sights. So Siddhartha saw four things he had never seen before. He was disturbed and didn't really understand what he was seeing. So the first sight was an old man. Siddhartha had never seen anyone old before and questioned his chariot driver. Channa, he asked Channa about what he was looking at. Channa explained that when people get older, they start to physically decline. The second sight was illness. When Siddhartha saw an ill person by the side of the road, he was upset, as he had never seen anyone who was ill before. Channa explained that during their lives, people do get ill. The third sight was a dead person being carried. Channa explained that everyone dies eventually. The fourth sight was a holy man walking through the street. This person made Siddhartha curious, as the holy man looked very calm and serene and untroubled. So Siddhartha wanted to find out why people suffer and how it might be possible to end this suffering. He decided that he would leave the palace and his family behind to go into the world and try to find some answers to the problem. He gave up all his possessions and luxurious lifestyle to try to understand more about suffering. It seems strange to me that he abandoned his wife and child, but of course they were fully protected and taken care of, and later both became his devoted followers. He spent some time as an ascetic, living a harsh life in the forest, but then realized that it was not the way. It was just as harmful to true spiritual progress as living a life of luxury. So he decided on the middle way, between and above the two, and devised the Four Noble Truths, which are: there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, there is an end to suffering, and the way out is the Eightfold Path, known as the Eightfold Path, which is right view, right intention, right speech, right livelihood, right action, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Now, there's a strong link between Buddhism and Theosophy, because in Galle, Sri Lanka, on May 25th, 1880, H.P. Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott took counsel. That is, they were formally acknowledged as Buddhists. In his Old Diary Leaves, Volume 2, Colonel Olcott writes that we had previously declared ourselves to be Buddhists, long before in America, both privately and publicly, so that this was but a formal confirmation of our previous professions. Later on he adds, I can say that if Buddhism contained a single doctrine that we were compelled to accept, we would not have taken counsel. Our Buddhism was that of the master adept Gautama Buddha, which was identical with the wisdom religion of the Aryan Upanishads and the soul of all the ancient world faiths. So why did H.P. Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott proclaim themselves to be Buddhists? To understand this, we have to look at the Theosophical masters who gave us the teachings. In the Mahatma letters to A.P. Sinnott, Master K.H., one of the Theosophical masters, says that the chiefs want a brotherhood of humanity, a real universal fraternity started. They had on several occasions proclaimed themselves to be followers of the Buddha. One of the chiefs just mentioned, known to us as the Mahachohan, stated in a letter that we, the devoted followers of that spirit incarnate of absolute self-sacrifice, of philanthropy, divine kindness, as of all the highest virtues available on this earth of sorrow, the man of men, Gautama Buddha, should ever allow the Theosophical Society to represent the embodiment of selfishness, the refuge of the few, with no thought in them for the many, is a strange idea, my brothers. So Gautama Buddha was born around 621 BC and was just one in a long line of Buddhas. He was part of a spiritual lineage that goes back millions of years. So we mustn't think of the Buddha as an isolated individual, but one of a long line of Buddhas appearing at certain times in our history. I do a talk on this, it's somewhere on my YouTube channel, and go into much more detail, but it would take up too much time, and I'd just be repeating. So it is clear that the Theosophical Society was started to continue the work of the Buddha in the sense that it is to follow and should follow the path of compassion that the Buddhas taught. Very little was understood during H.P. Blavatsky's life regarding Buddhism. Now times have changed, and there are many more Buddhist scriptures translated by actual practitioners, not just intellectuals, as they were in Victorian times. And the translations are much more accurate and infused with spirit. In Victorian times, it was mainly intellectuals, scholars, and Orientalists who translated, who had not much interest in Buddhism. They just translated the dead letter. So it was lacking the spirit that we have with someone who's a genuine practitioner of Buddhism. So the only book at that time that contained such a spirit was The Voice of the Silence, mentioned earlier, and translated by H.P. Blavatsky. And this book introduced the concept of the Bodhisattva to the West and taught the path of compassion. and the means to reach it by following the paramita path. And this was nothing new. It had been known in the East for centuries, but H.P. Blavatsky was one of the first, if not the first, to bring it to the attention of the West. It is accepted that the paramita path is the one followed by those who wish to tread the bodhisattva path of compassion, in contrast to the self-centered pratyeka Buddha path. And these paramitas are listed in the Voice of the Silence as qualities that we should try to develop, which would help us on the path, though they're not put forward as dogmas. They're just signposts, guidelines. So the first is dana, the key of charity and love immortal. The second is shila, the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and the effect and leaves no further room for karmic action. The third is kashanti, patient sweet, that naught can ruffle. The fourth is viraga, indifference to pleasure and to pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. The fifth is virya, the dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth out of the mire of lies terrestrial. Six is dhyana, whose golden gate once opened leads the Najal, the Najal being a saint or an holy man, an adept, leads the Najal towards the realm of Sat Eternal and its ceaseless contemplation. And the seventh is prajna, the key to which makes of a man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the jnanis. And jnanis are very advanced spiritual beings on higher levels than the human. And there's a book called The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. And it's a very in-depth explanation of how we should live the compassionate life by looking at the six paramitas of perfection in order and trying to practice them. In this, it is said that we should even be careful not to slam doors or move furniture heavily or raise our voice for any reason whatsoever. On the surface, this may seem very trivial compared with many other things that he says in the book, but in fact, it is showing respect for life on all levels of being and the development of awareness of the feelings of others and how even simple acts can affect them for good or for bad. So our words should be gentle and helpful. To show how essential it is to be mindful of even trivial things, there's a story of the Zen pupil who went to his master for instruction. It was raining that day, and the master asked the pupil on what side of the door he left his umbrella on entering. As he had forgotten, the master sent him away and told him to return when he had developed awareness on all levels of being. So the real essence of Buddhist teaching is beyond words and images. If we read scriptures such as the Diamond Sutra or the Heart Sutra, this becomes very clear. In Zen, there are what are known as koans. These are riddles or sayings that cannot be solved using the logical mind. They are meant to show that the lower aspects of our mind, are inadequate to experience true spirituality. So we need to go beyond. In the Voice of the Silence, it states that the mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. Meaning that the intellectual mind will kill out the spontaneous realization of the truth. But even the truth is just a conceptual view. A famous story is told about the Buddha, or Buddha Gautama. When Buddha was on Vulture Peak, he twirled a flower before the assembly. Everyone was silent. Only Mahakasyapa smiled. Buddha said, "I have the eye treasury of the true teaching, the heart of nirvana, the true form of no form, and the ineffable gate of Dharma. It is a special transmission outside the teaching. I now entrust it to Maha Kasyapa. So Maha Kasyapa was one of the Buddha's chief disciples, and he was the only one that got the message intuitively. So he passed on the teaching to him, and it was passed on from many Indian teachers and then into China. So this is an idea very much in tune with Zen Buddhist teaching. The word Zen means the same as the Sanskrit word dhyana and the Chinese word chan, all meaning simply meditation. She said that all the Buddha's teachings are both exoteric and esoteric, depending upon the consciousness of the one who is studying them. The same can be applied to theosophical teaching and to any other spiritual teaching, Eastern or Western. We only understand according to our level of consciousness. So in a way, the esoteric or hidden teaching is actually hidden in plain sight. Even the theosophical masters say that most, if not all of their teachings, are incommunicable until we reach a certain level of consciousness, which we need to understand them. The voice of the silence again says, the two schools of Buddha's doctrine, the esoteric and the exoteric, are respectively called the heart and the eye doctrine. Bodhidharma, who is a great spiritual teacher from India, called them in China, from whence the names reach Tibet, the Tsung men, Tsung men, which are the esoteric, and the Kiao men, which are the exoteric school. It is so named because it is the teaching which emanated from Gautama Buddha's heart, whereas the eye doctrine was the work of his head or brain. The heart doctrine is also called the seal of truth, or the true seal, a symbol found on the heading of almost all esoteric works. This seal of the heart was passed on from teacher to teacher. As in all things, the true esoteric or esoteric teaching can never be put into words. We have to find it in our own hearts. Words are just pointers. They're essential at times. It's like walking over the moors, trying to get to a certain destination. It's essential to follow the signposts, or we would become totally lost. But the actual walking has to be done by each one of us individually. But we do need the signposts, otherwise we might get completely lost. So there are signposts on the path of theosophy and Buddhism and any other spiritual path that we choose to follow. The Lotus Sutra is one of my favorite Buddhist scriptures. It's mainly about the Buddha predicting that his disciples will attain Buddhahood and stating what their names will be and what planet they will be on and what kind of environment they will create. But it's a way of saying that we all have this Buddha nature, or Christ consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, or the Tao, or whatever. Ultimately, all names will fade away. It was also one of the first sutras to predict Buddhahood for female disciples. Until then, Buddhism had been very patriarchal. So the outer frame doesn't matter. We all have the same life force, the same consciousness, the same spirit. So if on this planet we need to love each other, and we do need to, we have to start seeing ourselves as spiritual beings and seeing others as the same consciousness as each other, and all of the kingdoms of nature, elementals, minerals, plants, animals, and into the deva, or angelic realms of being. Politics, religion, philosophy all tend to promote separateness in general. We need to come together beyond all this as truly human beings. And to be human, we need to be humane, not ruled by animalistic instincts, but by a divine inspiration. Of course, we have to live in the world, But we need to get our priorities right. Too much intellectuality will block out the light of the spirit. It will make the person seem very erudite. But the fact is that it is only beyond the intellect that truth can be realized by direct experience. It's something we can't put into words. It's the Buddhist teaching of the raft. You need a raft to cross the river, but once on the other side, you need to leave it behind, as it will just become a burden. So the raft can be said to be the intellect, essential for a while in certain stages of our journey, but eventually to be left behind. It is written in the Diamond Sutra, "Thus shall ye think of this fleeting world, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom and a dream." So to look at things in perspective is important. When we look at others, we need to try to develop the eye of love, to see beyond the outer mask and realize that inwardly we are all the same. It's not easy, given the state of the world at the moment and things that are going on, terrible things are happening, and the attempts to divide us all and to turn us into Cains and Abels. But to those who are awake or awakening, it is a practice that should be attempted, as it is a way to purify the mind and to develop clear vision and to see humanity as it truly is, instead of how we have been indoctrinated to see it. It is a beautiful world. If we can just raise ourselves above the materialistic emanations of a society based upon misconceptions of what it is to be truly human and a complete unawareness of human solidarity. Gautama Buddha was inspired by compassion for suffering humanity, and that was his guiding light in giving out the teachings, his inspiration. If you look at them as exoteric teachings, they seem rather dry and intellectual. But if we can get to the essence, then they become illuminated, illumined. H.P. Blavatsky writes, "Every human being is born with a rudiment of that inner sense called intuition, which may be developed into what the Scottish know as second sight. All the great philosophers who, like Plotinus, Porphyry, and Iamblichus, employed this faculty, and they taught the doctrine. There's a faculty of the human mind," writes Iamblichus, "which is superior to all that which is born or begotten. Through it, we are enabled to attain union with the superior intelligences, to being transported beyond the scenes of this world and to partaking the higher life and peculiar powers of the heavenly ones. Were there no inner sight or intuition, the Jews would never have had the Bible, nor the Christians Jesus. What both Moses and Jesus gave to the world was the fruit of their intuitions or illumination. What the subsequent elders and teachers allowed the world to understand was dogmatic misrepresentations, too often blasphemy." End of quote. So religions that promote separateness and intolerance have drifted a long way from the inspiration of the ones who initiated it, even though they never intended to found a religion. The teachers never intended to found religions. It's people that did that afterwards, and then added rules, regulations, rituals, dogmas to it. The original teachers just came to help us to awaken to our true nature and live under the guidance of our higher self. H.P. Blavatsky again writes, "It is not violence that can ever ensure bread and comfort for all, nor is the kingdom of peace and love, of mutual help and charity and food for all, to be conquered by a cold, reasoning, diplomatic policy. It is only by the close brotherly union of men's and women's selves, of soul solidarity, of the growth and development of that feeling which makes one suffer when one thinks of the suffering of others, that the reign of justice and equality for all can ever be inaugurated. This is the first of the three fundamental objects for which the Theosophical Society was established and called the Universal Brotherhood of Humanity, regardless of race, creed, sex, caste, or colour. Buddhism is the most peaceful of all religions. There are many schools of Buddhism, some of them devotional, and some, like Zen teaching, teach us to try and get us to leave images and words behind. I've always been more attracted to Zen. I was into Zen Buddhism before I joined the Theosophical Society. Theosophy seems to be more attracted to Tibetan Buddhism, but I found this to be too much based upon images and rituals, in the outer sense, at least. Chan Buddhism was introduced into China by the Indian monk mentioned earlier, Bodhidharma. Buddhism was already there, but not the Chan or Zen type. Bodhidharma met the Emperor Wu, who told him that he had built Buddhist temples and translated scriptures from Indian to Chinese. Wu asked Bodhidharma what his merit would be for doing this, and Bodhidharma replied, none whatsoever. He was saying that just doing external things like that doesn't necessarily make one more spiritual. And also boasting just boosts the ego, which we are trying to transcend. Chan Buddhism moved into Japan and became Zen. Zen has become the basis of poetry, art, music, and the construction of gardens and temples in Japan, as well as a spiritual way of life. It belongs to the Mahayana school, which means the great vehicle, because it is concerned with the enlightenment of humanity, whereas the Hinayana, or small vehicle, also known as the Theravada, is a path that teaches a path suited to the individual. In both cases, meditation is of great importance. Bodhidharma says, our nature is the mind, and the mind is our nature. This nature is the same as the mind of all Buddhas. Buddhas of the past and future only transmit this mind. Beyond this mind, there's no Buddha anywhere. But deluded people don't realize that their own mind is the Buddha. They keep searching outside. They never stop invoking Buddhas or worshipping Buddhas and wondering, where is the Buddha? Don't indulge in such illusions. Just know your mind. Beyond your mind, there's no other Buddha. The sutras say everything that has form is an illusion. They also say, wherever you are, there's a Buddha. Your mind is the Buddha. Don't use a Buddha to worship a Buddha. Don't use a Buddha to worship a Buddha. And Zen teacher Bankei says, we don't have to become Buddha. We just have to remain Buddha. Remember the words from the voice of the silence? Look inward, thou art Buddha. So Bodhidharma is saying that the journey is an inner one. The mind is the key. In one sense, it is the great slayer of the real. But if it becomes illuminated by the light of the spirit, it is the gateway to enlightenment. We can do that, we can make it enlighten. There's a saying in the East, Manasa Tajasa, which means the illumined mind, illumined by the intuition. And by meditation, by listening to beautiful music, looking at nature, it all helps. Reading beautiful words, thinking beautiful thoughts, doing beautiful deeds, it all helps to illuminate the mind. The real heart of Buddhism, as said, is compassion, the desire to end suffering. That is the reason that the Buddha started on his journey. He saw suffering in the four sights, and also the holy man, who was serene and calm, and he knew then there was a way to end suffering, and he would find it. for the sake of all beings. One of my favourite Buddhist prayers is the Golden Link Prayer. We are a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. We will keep our link bright and strong. We will be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than ourselves. We will think pure and beautiful thoughts, say pure and beautiful words, and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amida's chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Amida is the Buddha of infinite light and symbolic of our divine nature, our inner light of love. In the Theosophical Glossary, H.P. Blavatsky writes about karma. When I say karma, it's different than karma. In India, the K-A-R-M-A is often pronounced karma to distinguish it from karma, which is K-A-M-A, and which is usually thought of as desire, as in the Kama Sutra, for example. But that's because but H.P. Blavatsky gives another definition, which before the word and concept became degraded. She says, karma is the first conscious, all-embracing desire for universal good, love, and for all that lives and feels, needs help and kindness. The first feeling of infinite tender compassion and mercy that arose in the consciousness of the creative one force, as soon as it came into life and being, as a ray from the absolute. Karma is preeminently the divine desire of creating happiness and love. So what a beautiful concept that is. I think that's the first thing that came into being. And it filters through all the planes of being and comes into our hearts as love, as pure love for all things. Not sensual love, that's what it became degraded into, pure divine love, the desire to end suffering, to bring peace, love and harmony to the world. A Zen saying is, no mud, no lotus. So we have to use life's experiences, seemingly good or bad, to help us on our way. It's all a matter of having the right attitude to life and its ups and downs, and growing in the light of the spiritual sun that is shining in each one of us behind our often misty minds. More misty than mystic, it would seem. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen teacher, made a statement that we should all regard ourselves as flowers and that we grow by being watered with love. We should look at this world as a wonderful garden, and how we grow spiritually is to love one another. You know, sunflowers turn towards the light, towards the sun, so we should always turn towards the light, towards the spiritual sun, in whatever way we can. So this seemingly simple statement has a profound meaning, and is typical of the totally practical advice that Thich Nhat Hanh gave out. Nothing technical to baffle the mind, just straight to the point. It's like KISS, K-I-S-S, which stands for keep it spiritually simple. It's all about practicing living the life. That's all that matters. No one who truly follows the teachings of the Buddha would ever entertain the use of violence, or the teachings of Jesus for all that matter, the true teachings. The fact is that most people have drifted away from any real belief in their religions and give just lip service to what is written in their scriptures. They become protective towards the counterfeit religion and oppose any other ways of thought, which leads to violence. So Christianity becomes a sort of anti-Christianity, and the same may be applied to Islam. Buddhism, in essence, is the most peaceful of all religions, as said, but still has its limitations in an exoteric sense. Some beautiful words from the voice of the silence are, let thy soul lend its ear to every cry of pain, like as the lotus bears its heart to drink the morning sun. Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself has wiped it with the sufferer's eye. But let each burning human tear drop on thy heart, and there remain, nor ever brush it off until the pain that caused it is removed. We can, of course, admire such words, but they're meant to awaken in us a certain experience to be lived, not just remain beautiful words on paper to discuss intellectually. In his book, The Buddha of Infinite Light, D.T. Suzuki explains the teachings of the Shin school of Buddhism in Japan. He writes about a certain class of devotees named Myokonin. Mayo means wonderful, ko means fragrance, and nin means person, signifying someone who manifests the wonderful fragrance of spirituality. And these people are not intellectuals. Some of them are actual illiterate, but they are sincere, kind-hearted, and compassionate, and that's all that matters. There was one man who learned that a temple in Kyoto, 200 miles away, was on fire. It was once a temple he had attended and was close to his heart. So he took a large carpet, soaked it in water, and shook it in the direction of the temple. Now, to our minds, this was rather a pointless act and seems rather foolish. But he was motivated by compassion and was spontaneously led to do something. He knew that he couldn't do anything, he was 200 miles away. But because of compassion, he felt he had to do something, anything, to try and help. This kind of act transcends logical reasoning and is difficult for us to understand. But as I said, it was a spontaneous reaction. So the heart of Buddhist teaching then is an awakening to our true being, realizing that beyond the maya or illusion of life, we live in a transcendental divine life. Bankei, the Japanese Zen teacher who I mentioned earlier, calls it the unborn Buddha mind, and says, as I've said earlier, that we don't need to become Buddhas, you just have to remain Buddhas. But H.P. Blavatsky points out that Buddhism is the closest religion to theosophy. But theosophy is different because it points to the essence of all religions, not just one. So it's, in that sense, it's on a higher level. But the teachings are identical as the teachings of Islam, in Sufism, and Christianity and Gnosticism, and Hinduism and Vedantism are all identical. Still, we can learn so much about gentleness, compassion, and love from experiencing the heart of Buddhist teaching. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe got something from it, hopefully. All I have to say is Om Shanti, 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 peace, 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 peace on earth and goodwill to all beings, which we need in the world today. And the teachings of the Buddhism can help us towards that. And the teachings of theosophy, any teaching that teaches compassion, love, and understanding is what we need and is sorely needed in the world today. Not intellectual distractions, just getting to the heart of things and spreading love, peace, and harmony in this troubled world. Thank you very much. Namaste.